Have you ever finally hit a savings milestone that felt impossible just a few months earlier? Like breaking $10,000 for the first time and then watch that money disappear faster than you saved it. Maybe you spent it on a car repair and some furniture, and suddenly you're back to square one wondering why you even bothered saving in the first place. Or maybe you've got $10,000 sitting in your checking account right now and you're not really sure what you're supposed to do with it. So it's just kind of sitting there while you try to figure out your next move. Here's something that might shock you. What you do when you hit $10,000 in savings will determine whether you build actual wealth or stay broke for the rest of your life. And most people make the exact wrong choice at this critical moment. My name is Alicia, and I've spent years watching people hit their first real savings milestone and then completely sabotage their financial future by mishandling it. If you've worked hard to save $10,000 and you want to make sure it's the beginning of building wealth instead of just a temporary win that evaporates into nothing, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button if this information helps you out. Here's what most people get completely wrong about hitting $10,000. They treat it like they just won the lottery. They've been grinding and sacrificing and saying no to things they wanted, and finally they hit this 5-figure milestone. So their brain tells them they deserve to celebrate, to treat themselves, to finally buy that thing they've been wanting. And before they know it, that $10,000 has been spent on a nicer car, some home upgrades, a vacation they convinced themselves they earned, and maybe some other random purchases that seemed justified at the time. 6 months later, they're back to having almost nothing saved, wondering why building wealth feels impossible. The brutal truth is that $10,000 is both a lot of money and completely insignificant at the same time. It's a lot of money in the sense that most Americans don't have it. According to various surveys, somewhere around 40% of Americans couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency without going into debt. So having $10,000 already puts you ahead of nearly half the population. You should feel proud of yourself for getting there. But $10,000 is also basically nothing in terms of actual financial security. It's not enough to retire on. Obviously, it's not enough to buy a house in most markets. It's barely enough to cover a few months of expenses if you lost your job. $10,000 is not wealth. It's the foundation you build wealth on top of. And what you do with it next determines everything. Let me tell you exactly what happens to most people who hit $10,000 in savings and why they stay broke despite reaching this milestone. They've got the money sitting in their checking account because that's where they've been accumulating it. They look at their account balance and it feels amazing to see that 5-figure number. But because it's sitting in their checking account, it doesn't feel separate from their regular spending money. It's all just kind of mixed together. So they start making slightly bigger purchases than they normally would. Nothing crazy, just spending a little more freely because, hey, they've got $10,000. They can afford it. Maybe they go out to dinner a few more times than usual. Maybe they buy some clothes they've had their eye on. Maybe they upgrade their phone, even though their current one works fine. Each individual purchase seems reasonable. They're not blowing thousands of dollars on anything crazy. But these slightly elevated spending habits continue for weeks or months. And slowly the $10,000 starts dropping. $9,000, $8,500. $7,800. They notice it's going down, but they tell themselves they'll be more careful next month and build it back up. Except they never do because they've already adjusted to this slightly higher spending level, and they can't seem to dial it back down. Then an actual emergency happens. The car needs $2,000 in repairs, or they need a new laptop for work, or they have an unexpected medical bill. And because they've already spent their savings down to maybe $6,000 or $7,000, this emergency wipes out a huge chunk of what's left. Now they're back to $3,000 or $4,000, feeling completely demoralized because all that work they put into saving $10,000 feels wasted. They saved 4 months or maybe even years to hit $10,000. And it took just a few months of careless spending plus one emergency to destroy it all. This is the cycle that keeps people broke forever. They save up some money. They let it sit somewhere accessible. They slowly spend it down through a combination of lifestyle creep and emergencies. And they never actually build wealth because they never get past this pattern. But here's what people who actually build wealth do differently when they hit $10,000. And it's going to sound almost too simple to matter. But I promise you this is the difference between staying broke and building real financial security. The moment you hit $10,000, you need to split that money up and put it in different places with different jobs. Not next week, not after you think about it for a while, immediately. Because as long as that $10,000 is sitting in one account that you can easily access, you're going to slowly spend it. That's just human nature. Your brain sees money as available and it finds reasons to spend it. But when you split that money up and assign each portion a specific purpose, suddenly it becomes much harder to casually spend it down. Here's exactly what you should do the day you hit $10,000 in savings. First, you take $3,000 to $5,000 and you move it to a completely separate high yield savings account that you do not touch except for genuine emergencies. Not emergencies like you really want to go on vacation and you can't afford it with your regular income. Actual emergencies. Your car dies. You lose your job. You have a medical crisis. This is your emergency fund, and it needs to be physically separated from your regular spending money. Most people keep their emergency fund in the same account as their regular money, and then they wonder why they keep dipping into it for non-emergencies. Put it somewhere separate. Somewhere that takes a day or two to transfer back to your checking account. So there's actual friction between you and your money. The psychological effect of this separation is massive. When you have $10,000 in your checking account, your brain thinks you have $10,000 available to spend. But when you have $2,000 in your checking account and $3,000 in a separate emergency fund that you've committed not to touch, your brain adjusts to living on that $2,000. You make different decisions. You're more careful. You think twice before spending because you can't just casually dip into your savings. Now, here's where most people screw this up. Even if they do create a separate emergency fund, they put their entire $10,000 into that emergency. And then they feel really good about themselves for being financially responsible. And that's not terrible. Having $10,000 in an emergency fund is definitely better than having it scattered across random purchases. But it's also not optimal because money sitting in a savings account earning 1% or 2% interest is barely keeping up with inflation. You're being safe with your money, but you're not building wealth. You're protecting what you have, but you're not growing it. This is why you only put $3,000 to $5,000 into your emergency fund when you first hit $10,000. That's enough to cover most single emergencies without completely wiping you out. But it's not so much that you're keeping all your money in a low growth account. The rest of that $10,000 needs to start working for you, actually generating returns that compound over time. And this is where the second critical move comes in. After you've secured your emergency fund, you take whatever is left from that $10,000, probably somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000, and you put it into a Roth IRA or a taxable brokerage account invested in index funds. Not individual stocks that you picked because you read something online. Not cryptocurrency because your friend told you it's going to moon. Boring, simple, broad market index funds that track the entire stock market and then you don't touch it. You let it sit there and grow for years, ideally decades. Here's what most people don't understand about investing until they actually do it. Investing isn't about getting rich quick or picking the next big winner. Investing is about putting money somewhere it can grow faster than inflation while you continue living your life. When you invest $5,000 in index funds, averaging 7 to 8% annual returns, you're not going to wake up next month with $10,000. That's not how it works. But over 5 years, that $5,000 might grow to $7,000 over 10 years. It might be $10,000 over 20 years. It could be $20,000 or more. And you didn't have to do anything to make that happen except leave it alone and let compound growth work. But here's the part that really separates people who build wealth from people who stay broke. What you do after you've split up that initial $10,000 because saving $10,000 once and then stopping is basically meaningless in terms of building long-term wealth. The people who actually become financially secure are the ones who use that $10,000 milestone as the launching point for a system that continues building wealth automatically. Once you've got your $3,000 to $5,000 emergency fund established and you've invested the rest, you need to set up automatic transfers that continue growing both of these buckets. Maybe you set up an automatic transfer of $150 per paycheck into your emergency fund until it reaches a full 6 months of expenses, and you set up another automatic transfer of $200 per paycheck into your investment account. These numbers will obviously vary based on your income and expenses, but the principle is the same. You're not just saving $10,000 and calling it done. You're using that $10,000 as the foundation of a wealth building system that runs automatically, whether you feel motivated or not. This automatic system is critical because motivation is garbage. Motivation gets you to $10,000 the first time. Motivation gets you excited about investing and building wealth, but motivation disappears the moment life gets hard or you see something you really want to buy or your friends are all taking expensive trips and you feel left out. Motivation is what gets you started. Systems are what keep you going when motivation fails. And the system is simple. Money comes into your checking account. A portion automatically goes to your emergency fund. A portion automatically goes to your investment account. And you live on whatever is left. Now, let's talk about something that trips up almost everyone who hits $10,000 for the first time. The temptation to use it as a down payment on something big. Maybe you've been wanting to buy a house and you think $10,000 could be your down payment. Or maybe you want to buy a nicer car and you think putting $10,000 down will get you a great deal. Or maybe you want to start a business and $10,000 feels like enough to get started. And here's the thing, none of these are automatically bad ideas, but they're probably the wrong move when you've just hit $10,000 for the first time in your life. Why? Because using your entire $10,000 as a down payment on a house or a car means you're back to zero in savings. You're committing yourself to a monthly payment, probably 4 years, and you have no cushion. If anything goes wrong, you lose your job and you can't make the mortgage payment. Your car breaks down and you can't afford the repairs on top of your car payment. You're basically setting yourself up for financial stress because you jumped too quickly from having $10,000 saved to spending it all on a down payment. The people who build real wealth do something different. They keep building their savings after hitting $10,000. They get to $20,000, then $30,000, then $50,000. And then when they make a major purchase like a house, they're putting 20% down. They have a healthy emergency fund left over and they're not stretching to afford the monthly payment. They're buying from a position of strength instead of barely scraping together enough to qualify for a loan. I know this sounds slow and boring, and you probably want your house or your car or whatever you've been dreaming about now instead of years from now. But here's what you need to understand. The difference between people who build wealth and people who stay broke is almost entirely about patience and delayed gratification. Poor people see $10,000 and think about what they can buy with it right now. Wealthy people see $10,000 and think about what it could become if they're patient. And that difference in perspective determines everything. Let's talk about taxes for a second because this is where a lot of people mess up without even realizing it. When you're investing that $5,000 to $7,000 from your initial $10,000, where you put it matters enormously from a tax perspective. If you just open a regular brokerage account and start investing, you're going to pay taxes on any dividends and capital gains. That's not the end of the world, but it's not optimal either. This is why I mentioned a Roth IRA earlier and why it's probably the single best place to put your first investment dollars. A Roth IRA lets you contribute money that you've already paid taxes on, and then everything that money earns grows completely tax-free forever. You invest $5,000 today, it grows to $50,000 over the next 20 or 30 years, and you never pay a single dollar of taxes on that. $45,000 gain. Compare that to a regular investment account where you might pay 15 or 20% in taxes on those gains. The Roth IRA could save you thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars in taxes over your lifetime, all because you made the right choice about where to put your money when you first hit $10,000, the annual contribution. Limit for a Roth IRA changes periodically, but it's usually around $6,000 to $7,000 per year. So when you hit $10,000, you could max out your Roth IRA contribution for the year and still have money left over for your emergency fund. This is the kind of strategic thinking that wealthy people use automatically, but that most people never learn because nobody teaches them. Here's something else that happens when you properly handle your first $10,000. You start to understand the difference between saving and investing, and why both matter. But for different reasons. Your emergency fund in that high-yield savings account is saving. It's safe, it's accessible, but it's not growing much. Your money in index funds is investing. It's going to fluctuate. It might go down sometimes, but over long periods, it should grow significantly faster than inflation. Most people think these are the same thing, or they only do one or the other. Rich people understand you need both. You need savings for short-term security and emergencies. You need investments for long-term wealth building and retirement. When you hit $10,000 and you split it between an emergency fund and investments, you're essentially putting both of these systems in place at the same time. You're protecting yourself against immediate threats while also building toward future financial freedom. And once you understand this balance, you'll never go back to just keeping all your money in checking account or all of it in a savings account that barely grows. Now, let's address the biggest psychological hurdle that stops people from doing any of this: the fear of locking up their money where they can't easily access it. They've worked so hard to save $10,000, and the idea of putting $5,000 of it into an investment account where they can't just withdraw it whenever they want feels scary. What if they need it? What if there's an emergency? What if they regret it? This fear keeps people poor because they never move past holding cash to actually investing and building wealth. But here's the reality. If you've properly set up your $3,000 to $5,000 emergency fund, you can handle most emergencies without touching your investments. And if you have an actual catastrophic emergency that requires more than your emergency fund can cover, yes, you can withdraw money from your investment accounts. You might pay some taxes or penalties depending on the type of account, but you can access it if you absolutely need to. The point isn't that the money is locked away forever and you can never touch it. The point is that by putting it somewhere that requires a few extra steps to access, you protect yourself from spending it on impulse purchases or lifestyle creep. The people I see building serious wealth are the ones who hit $10,000 and immediately make it harder to spend that money casually. They set up their accounts, they automate their transfers, and then they basically forget about it and let the system run in the background while they focus on earning more money and living their lives. The people who stay broke are the ones who keep all their money easily accessible and then wonder why it keeps disappearing. Here's the part where I need to be brutally honest with you. Most people reading this won't actually do any of what I just described. They'll read it. They'll think it makes sense. They might even feel motivated for a day or two, and then they'll do exactly what they've always done. They'll hit $10,000, leave it in their checking account, slowly spend it down on a combination of lifestyle creep and emergencies, and end up back where they started. Then they'll wonder why they can't seem to get ahead financially, despite working hard and making decent money. But if you're one of the rare people who actually takes action, who hits $10,000 and immediately splits it between an emergency fund and investments, who sets up automatic transfers to keep building both buckets, who resists the temptation to spend it all on something big before you're really ready, your entire financial future just changed. You're not just $10,000 richer. You've put in place the foundation of a wealth-building system that will continue growing for the rest of your life. $10,000 is simultaneously your biggest accomplishment, so far and completely insignificant in terms of where you're capable of going. What you do with it determines which of those perspectives becomes your reality. Handle it right, split it up, invest it, protect it, and build on it. And 10 years from now, you'll look back at this moment as the turning point, when you stop being broke and started building real wealth. Handle it wrong, spend it, keep it all in checking. Use it as a down payment before you're ready. And 10 years from now, you'll still be trying to save your first $10,000, wondering why it's so hard. The COIC